We all remember recess growing up in school. Recess was a time of day where you could have all the conversations that you could not have while in class. Recess is where you had the real conversations. And real conversations we're going to have. In each episode of the Recess podcast, I'm going to have real conversations explaining students and school. I'm David McGuire, and I'll be your host. It's recess time, y'all. What's up, everybody? Back again, episode 26 of the Recess Podcast. It's the Takeover show, but more importantly, this is the closeout show of 2020. What a year it has been. I'm excited to be back, and there was no better way to do this show than to connect with my people. We're going to have a real conversation about the year 2020 when it comes to education. We're going to highlight some things that happened this year. We're going to talk about some lows. And then we're going to kind of take a trip into what we hope is a brighter future when it comes to not just society, but I think for us, education as well in 2021. So again, excited to have the Indy K12 takeover. But if you're in the comments, like, share this video, talk with us about some of the things that's happened to you in 2020, and what are you looking forward in 2021. But without further ado, I will yield the floor again. They're not guests because they've been here before, so they're just like family. But I'll yield the floor real quick and let them, for the new listeners, introduce themselves, who you are. We'll start with the new dad on the show, Mr. Andrew. Brother, how's it going, man? Good to see you again. Just quickly give folks a little bit about, who you are, what you're doing around here, and everything like that.
Andrew Pillow, freelance writer extraordinaire, also a 10-year teaching veteran as of January 1st, and we're still guests. I mean, it's still your show. Just because we've been here before doesn't mean that we not guests no more.
Well, it's like extended family, man. At some point, you just become part of the crew. Last but not least, Educator Barnes, who is back, looking good to see you on the screen. We had an opportunity to briefly check out the podcast. Going to finish the rest of it, but reintroduce the folks who you are and just a little bit about you.
Well, glad to be back on the show again. This is my 15th year in education. I'm a middle school academic dean, writer for Indy K12. I'm also the editor, and I'm glad to be on the show to have a real conversation.
Yes, indeed. It's gonna be a good one. And again, if you're in the comments, share and post. My boy, Dr. Smith has jumped on. He's already said 2020 has been a year of growth and overflow. And then, of course, the AOS podcast dropped on the scene for the folks. So it's been a big year for that. Just been a big year, for me personally with the podcast, but definitely excited about the AOS piece. So we'll jump right into it and talk to. So highs, man. 2020. Let's start off on a positive note. So from a high standpoint, Andrew, we'll start with you, man. What have been some highs for you in 2020, man? What are some things you want to highlight? And it could be education, it could be personal, just in general. What are some high points for you?
Sometimes I feel guilty saying this because I know 2020 has been a hard year for people. It has been a fairly decent year for me personally. Not only having a daughter, but I've also, hit some achievement milestones in other areas. I've gotten, my house situated, which I didn't ever think was going to happen, partially because I had the time, been home all this time. I've gotten a lot of things accomplished that I didn't think I was going to be able to have the time to get accomplished in terms of school. I've had great conversations with my administrators about what my role will be going forward and things like that. And I'm very happy with that. So it's been really outside of the things that are happening in the world. It's been a good year for me. Mm-hmm. Had, COVID not happen, all of the, police situations haven't happened and things like that. Kobe dying, all those things haven't happened. This would be a pretty high year for me. I'd be riding high. This is all the other stuff. Me personally, everything's gone fine. And even from a standpoint of those things happening, I'm pretty much untouched. My income hasn't changed. You know what I mean? It's actually gone up during this time. I've been pretty lucky to not be affected by a lot of the other things that anybody else is. So I can't complain.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Shawnta, what about you? What's been the highs of 2020 for you?
I would say one thing is kind of knowing that this school administration thing I can do. I transitioned into school administration during the 2019-2020 school year. And then, of course, this like pandemic happened. So there's like no admin class that really explains how to prepare for that. But it really gave me an opportunity to really stretch myself, to really grow myself and see that, yeah, I can really do this. I think to piggyback on what Andrew said, I actually moved into a new house at the end of 2019, and I still have my first house. And we only moved 4 streets over because it was important to us to stay within our school district. But I still had stuff in my first house, and then I was like 4 streets over in my new house. And like when 2020 started, I had boxes everywhere. So with being at home, it gave me an opportunity to really figure out how I wanted to put stuff, because my husband and I, we don't agree on anything when it comes to decorations. It's like a 2-month negotiation to do literally anything, even picking out paint color. We had our basement remodeled, and just to go back for like a month over 2 colors. And it was like shades of the same color. So just like the fact that I was able to do those things. And then I just really feel truly blessed because I've stayed employed during this time. My kids are doing well. They've been remote the whole entire school year, this school year, and they've still had first quarter, they had all straight A's. Second quarter, we have A's and some B's because, they're kind of a little bit over being online the whole time. But I just feel truly grateful. So I really can't complain. I can't think of anything to really to complain about.
Mm-hmm. Now, I echo everything you all said, and I think Andrew, you said it. You said it first. It's kind of hard you feel almost guilty, right, with everything happened. But this is what I say. Some of my highs again have been, I think, having an opportunity when school closed during the pandemic. I had a lot of valuable time and intimate time with my daughter, right, learning how to be a dad. She was still fairly new, and we celebrated her first birthday in the midst of COVID, right, in April. But while I was out of school and leading remotely, I was able to have her throughout the day. I was able to have her, over the course of multiple days, longer than normal. And I just had really good time with her. And I think time that I probably wouldn't have gotten, because typically I would get her on the weekends or, after work. But being able to wake up, go to sleep with her, cook her lunch, cook her dinner, learn her nap schedule, and just different things like that. That was my biggest high in 2020, the intimate time I got while school was closed with my daughter. I think another high would be just seeing the resilience of schools and how schools have was able to rethink education, although it being forceful, right? And we were forced to rethink it. I think that was good. That was a high for me. Schools that probably would have never, including my own, that probably would have never went 1-to-1. We did it. It just wasn't in our radar for a top priority. But being forced to do that is good, because I think, as we talked about, and we'll get into a little later, equitable internet and equitable technology access in schools and at home is a need for everybody. And so us being forced to go that route has been great. And honestly, I did have a lot of opportunities to make a little bit more money, right? A little bit more pocket change. I had more time to write. And then I think the 2 biggest highs outside of, the personal thing is the Recess podcast was launched on April 7th. This is the 26th show, and did the AOS podcast and met some dope people that I have been able to connect with and call my friends. And so that's been a blessing as well. So, it's a lot of highs, and definitely in 2020, and we'll get to the lows. But I want to ask you guys this when we stand on the highs. When you think about from your school standpoint, right, what has been the biggest success your school has accomplished this year? When you think about something from your school that you say, like, man, I tell you what, even in the pandemic, we did accomplish this. I talked about us going 1-to-1 and that being a big accomplishment from us. But what about you all from your school standpoint? What's some big wins or big highs of 2020?
My school was already had 1-to-1, so that wasn't really that big of an accomplishment for them from that standpoint. But it's a big difference between having a 1-to-1 technology ratio at school and then having it with kids at home. And I think that presents a whole new set of barriers. So you're taking somebody who is probably used to managing technology at school, and now they are managing technology at school and at home. And we didn't hire an extra person for that. It was still the same person who did that. And, there were some tasks that were divided among the staff as well. So just learning what that looks like, learning how to make kids get on a website you want them to be on when they're not in front of you, learning how to monitor what people are doing when you're not standing over their shoulder is a huge, huge undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that we do it well yet, but we do it well enough. Like school occurs every day.
Yes.
And that's the most important part. And I would even say that it occurs in a way that more or less resembles what you would expect to find in person. Now, obviously, it's not the same. If I teach math right now, if someone gets a math problem wrong, I don't know why they got it wrong because I can't see their work. So you still have those gaps. But I have contact with most students daily. And even having had a Chromebook for every student beforehand, just getting that into the hands of students at home and getting them internet and things like that and making sure they're on the websites and making sure they're up on time and things like that is a big deal.
Absolutely. Real quick, Dr. Smith says something that is true. Connecting and partnering with parents in a new and deeper way has been great. High as well. I think we've always been good with parent engagement at our school and parent involvement. But I think to Dr. Smith's point, we were able to connect deeper with families, right? We had some really deep conversations with our families, especially the ones that we were trying to connect and find resources for as they were, navigating this new space and the difficulties. And I think we were able to build relationships that weren't all focused on the education of their schools, right? And the education of their kids, but it's more about them as people. And I learned a lot about who my families were as people. And I think they got to learn from myself and our staff who we are as people. So that's been great as well for us. So Shawnta, what about you? I mean, you what has been like the accomplishment, the high from you and your school this year in 2020?
I would say for my school, if I'm looking and comparing back to the previous school year, would be teacher collaboration. This school year, teachers really had to lean on each other to really figure out how to teach better and how to engage students better, because you had teachers that you would consider proficient in the in-person setting. And then when we shifted over to remote learning, you may had a younger teacher that was better to use technology and engage. And so you really had to be able to say, hey, I'm trying to use Nearpod right now, and it's not working so well. And I heard and kids will tell you, like, I'm in the middle school, right? So kids will straight up interrupt your class and say, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so don't have a problem with this, or say something like that, which kind of leads you to go, talk to that person and say, how did you do this in your class? So I felt, and then my school does surveys. And so just from those different surveys we gotten back, it seems like people felt like that collaboration was stronger and that people were working well together. So I think those are some of the things that has went well, because when teachers collaborate, I think that impacts student achievement when teachers are working almost smarter, but not harder. They're working together and trying to figure out those gaps. So I'm just glad to be a facilitator of that.
Yeah. Hey, listen.
You found it ironic if they work better together outside?
I was literally going to that. Yep. That was going to be my question.
I would say, I'm going to keep it real. And I almost wrote a piece about this for Indy K12, but I just didn't get around to this one. Well, because we're doing that teacher confession series. I wanted to do like, I have enjoyed working at home. Like, cause like, that was like a controversy to even say that, like, I enjoy at home, but it's like the little things. It's kind of like what David said about being able to interact with my kids more. That was really meaningful to me. But sometimes there's things at my house that helps me decompress that's not at work. So if I just need a minute, I can just step away and go sit in my chair, or step away and go to my bedroom and sit down for a minute. But at work, it's like that, especially being an administrator, which you're walking on your hip, like that grind is just constant. And so for me, I actually, on the days, because I was going between working at home and working on campus, on the days I worked remotely, I got twice as much done than the days I was on campus. And so I also think about our teachers. Some of them had accommodations where they worked at home, because our middle school for most of the year stayed 100% remote. So our 6th through 8th graders have never been on campus this school year. Our 5th graders did come on campus after fall break, and then everybody went remote. But the teachers, I just felt like my teacher morale was better. And this may be something we talk about later. some schools didn't give teachers the choice. They just say you must work on campus. And so when teachers kind of had that autonomy to be like, and I just think some of the reasons, I'm just going to get real. I don't trust you to work at home. I just think that's crap. And the reason I say that is my husband's in technology. And so his job, he has to be able to work wherever he's at, whether he's at, the government building or at our house. And I said to my husband, how do they keep y'all accountable? He says, you have things you have to deliver. If you don't deliver results, you get canned. And so he said in education, I feel like if you're not teaching or if you're not showing up to your class, if you're not doing your grade or whatever it is, those tangible things, then that should be the metric to be like, you must be on campus. But I do think teachers should get the choice, because some teachers, their house is too distracting and they want to be on campus. I just don't like that we force people. But for me, I think for some teachers, getting a break off of campus is the reason why they were able to collaborate more. They were in a better headspace.
Yeah. I think a couple of things that you said that stuck out with me. I think the first is the piece about giving teachers the option. First of all, our network said you can't teach from the building, right? So I think they went the opposite approach, right? Of saying, nah, y'all can't come up in here, right? And they wanted us at home, which I was shocked by that, because I think if I was to be asked, I would have been like, no, I want them in the building. There are some teachers that I don't trust, but I'm willing to learn to trust them to teach from home. And I think and to your point, to what your husband said, is you got to give them deliverables or something to hold them accountable, right? So whether it's making sure they submit an end of the day report or something. But honestly, as a leader, if I want to know if my teacher's teaching, go into the classrooms. That's the piece that people don't talk about. People want to talk about teachers during this time not working. I bet my bottom dollar it's some principals around this part and school leaders that are really skating, not doing no work. They're not observing a lick of instruction. They're not doing any type of supports for teachers. They're not making no type of phone calls. That's the part that people don't want to talk about. Some of these school leaders who ain't doing jack squat. So while we want to come down on teachers, right? Let's talk about these school leaders, because there's some that get on Twitter and all the stuff that they're doing. And I'm just like, nah, I doubt it, right? Just because I had to create myself a day, minute by minute, hour by hour schedule, just so I wouldn't feel like I was wasting my time as a school leader, right? So I made sure I got into every room. I had follow-up calls. I even jumped on the attendance team to do things like that, just because my teachers are teaching their ass off, right, all day and trying to navigate 13 different platforms at the same time. And I was like, man, what am I doing, right? And so that's the part that people really don't want to talk about. And Dr. Smith said it, yeah. Man, they skating like the Olympics, man. Like these school leaders out here not doing no work. And so that's the part people don't want to talk about. It's easy to
and that's true. And I will say, like, some of my teachers are like, why are you in advisory every day? Like, I go to advisory class every single morning. I rotate through my teachers. But I thought to myself, if I'm not going to advisory, then what's to say that I'm just not in bed sipping lemonade? So I actually intentionally go to advisory. First of all, I thought our advisory last school was pretty weak. I felt like it was just chat time. We weren't really doing anything. So I'm like, this school year, we're remote. We have to take this more seriously, because that's the only time where kids kind of get to talk a little bit more freely, because in the remote learning setting for secondary, you don't have the passing periods anymore. You don't have like going to the cafeteria. So that's the time that kids are being social. And I wanted to make sure it was productive. So I'm in somebody's advisory class every single day, to the point that people are like, am I doing something wrong? I said, no. And then it gave me an opportunity to connect with students. So I was challenged school leaders, if you're not showing up to all parts of the day, then what are you doing? And I don't mean, there's stuff that we have to do. Don't get me wrong. There's reports, there's data analysis, there's stuff that we have to do, but you can find time to show up. So it does appear that you're actually doing your job.
Amen to that. Ditto to that. All right, so we're going to jump into the lows of 2020. I'm sure we got a lot for these. Shawnta, I'll start with you. You know, I hate to ask that question, but like, you know, let's talk about what have been some low points, you know, for 20, and of course we could probably name up plenty of them, but what have been some low points of 2020 for you this year?
I would say the thing, and I've talked about this publicly on Twitter. My school knows I've talked about it, so I'm just putting that out there for everybody. Like, she got to lose her job. It's already been dealt with. But it was like March, the first week of March, I actually submitted a complaint to our HR department at my school, and it was like 17 pages long, just about some harassment I was getting at my job. And then the pandemic happens, right? Our HR person gets let go. So it doesn't even get dealt with until like the summer, right before school starts up again. And so earlier in my career, when I was a youngin', I'm like, I gotta deal with this, I'm out. But at this point in time in my career, I wasn't even actually gonna make a complaint, but the HR director, I would just tell her what was going on. But I said, I don't need you to do anything because I'm good, because what I knew is that the person I was having issues with, they were already being dealt with per se. So I didn't need to do anything, but there wasn't anything documented. So I turned this in, and then I write, because social justice summer happened. We all got woke, whatever. And I wrote this piece about feeling like emotionally unsafe at my school because we did these like racial equity talks with our executive director. And the call I happened to be on was mostly all the Black employees, right? And so we all were saying these similar things, and we all talked about similar things. So I'm like, hey, this is not even just in my head. It's not just a me thing. It's like a collective we thing. So I just kind of wrote about that. And so that turned into Shawnta's pulling down the culture of the school. Shawnta is causing the school not to be positive. And the last thing I remember was I don't like the way Shawnta advocates when she writes and when she's on people's podcasts. To the point, I've been in meetings where people have literally quoted things I've written, but they don't actually name drop me. They just do it and then don't say anything, which is super shady. And so I said back to my school, and then people started reporting me to HR about stuff I was writing. And actually, one of the episodes of the Recess podcast I was on was actually one of the things that got quoted. And so I said to them, I have exemplary performance review. I'm meeting my metrics. And I said, there's issues here. So are you going to worry about how I said and what I said? Or are you going to do something about it? So essentially nothing happened to me, to the disappointment of some people. And I say disappointment because when you can't look me in the eye in the hallway, you mad. Be big mad because I'm going to throw out in your presence. So that was hard. But the good thing about it is that the teachers that I supervise, they didn't have issues with me. They want to know more about some of the stuff I was talking about. So we call like the Barnes bubble. So that's my team. So my team was like down for the cause and the things I was talking about. But that was probably one of the lows, to be in a situation where I was just like, I'm not switching jobs over this. I'm just not. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to stick it out and I'm going to be good. And you did these things. You now have the consequence and I'm going to thrive. So that was probably like the low. And I would say the second low, which is not a low, I'm on medical leave right now from work. And just to be in a situation during the pandemic, knowing I had to have this surgery, kicking myself, knowing I could have done it earlier and have this hysterectomy. I knew I had all these issues, and I was just worried because I'm leaving my teachers. And when I tell you, teachers were just like, Shawnta, who's going to be my supervisor while you're gone? I won't be able to talk to you. Because I shut it down. Like, you can't talk to me when I'm on leave. It was a low for me, but it actually ended up being a blessing because I don't hardly watch TV. So I've been able to watch TV and kind of get some things done. But I would say those are my two lows, just unexpectedly having to go off of work and then dealing with that in the workplace, being an administrator at the time and learning how to navigate the politics of a job. Because what people don't tell you in your education classes is that there's politics in education and you have to learn how to navigate them. And as you quote unquote climb the ladder, the navigation gets more tricky and more difficult. But I'm also a person that believes in telling your truth and speaking up when things are happening. And so I would say that's my lows.
Absolutely. Man, mine, and I'm gonna put up Dr. Smith's quote because this was actually one that I was gonna share as well. So Dr. Smith, who's my AOS podcast partner and brother and family, we did a little billboard thing this year, and so I did one in the summer with the pictures of Black people who were murdered by the police, and then he followed it up and did an I Can't Breathe billboard, and it's crazy how much a billboard got people in their feelings. I think the first time that I experienced a viral moment on Twitter was when I posted a picture of the billboard we created. And, I'm going to call them the Twitter racists were big mad. They were real angry. And I couldn't understand why. But so that was a low for me because we were trying to do is do what a lot of folks were doing at that time, was making sure that those people's faces and names weren't forgotten. And I wanted to be standing my truth as a school leader, as a Black man, as a Black American citizen, and say, like, this is not right. And these folks need to make sure that we don't forget who they are. And people were mad that I used my school as a platform and blah, 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 but didn't even ask whether I asked my staff, some students, some families of my school, were they okay with it? And they were all good with it. And so the other folks were mad about it, and it went on Twitter and it was viral, and people were just like angry and nasty. And it highlighted again for me just how far we are as a country. I'm gonna pay a homage to Barack Obama's new book, A Promised Land. We are so far away from that promised land, and it's sad because we are in 2020, and we have had a Black man in the White House and a Black family in the White House. So you would think some of these things would be better. So that was a low. I think another low for me is watching how bad people struggle. Man, and I kind of wrote about this in a piece that will be out soon. It's just watching folks struggle. Man, it was hard, right? And knowing people that lost their job, car got repoed, they got evicted, they couldn't feed their family. Like, people have real life struggles. And that to me was just a low, because it was sad. It made me sick and sad and hurt watching those people struggle, and hearing those people's stories of people losing loved members to COVID, people catching COVID, and just the impact it's had. And so that was a major low for me, just watching that. And it's still to this day reading it, and I'll get into it too. Actually, I'm gonna get into it right now. And I'm gonna share something with y'all that I saw, and I don't know how true this is, because it was something I saw on Instagram, so the numbers may not be correct. But we were taught at an early age that 1 + 1 = 2, right? Like 1 and 1 always equals 2. And I saw some numbers that just didn't add up to 1 + 1 = 2. And so I'm gonna just read it, and I don't know how true this is, but if it is. So I saw where it says Congress members got paid $190,000 to argue about giving folks who are struggling $600 on a stimulus package. That just doesn't add up to me. On December 22nd, today when I read that just became a new low for me. That these folks got paid almost $200,000 to almost shut the government down and argue on whether or not people should. Now, of course, there's other things and litanies in that bill, and I get all that. But they argued over $600 to give people in a pandemic. First of all, $600 for some people won't even get their account to not being in the negative, right? Like, so what is really $600 for people during this time? And so when I read that, it was sick. That was a low, that these folks are getting paid that type of money to argue whether or not people need $600. So again, I don't know how true that is, but if it's true or remotely true, that's sickening and that's a low. And I'm even more disappointed at our elected officials, because I was one of those people that did have high hopes for people that were elected. Call me naive or whatever, but I just had high hopes that they would do right by the people. And if that's true, that's a low. So those are some of my lows for this year. Andrew, what about you, man? What have been some lows for 2020?
I mean, like I said, I earlier, I haven't really had any personal lows. But I will say that in conjunction with what you guys said, working from home has pros and cons. And one of them is, if you are prone to work a lot, then you always can work. There's no barrier to me getting up at 2 a.m. and working on something now. Whereas before, there were certain things that I would work on at home, and certain things that I would do at school, and certain things, like, there is no checks and balances anymore. There are no barriers to letting my mind run wild when I'm supposed to be sleeping, and then thinking I got to get up and do this or do that. And that's caused some problems, especially with a baby, like, wife doesn't want to see, me getting up to go, twiddle away on a computer down here. Because as far as she's concerned, all I'm doing down here is playing games. Like, there's nothing constructive ever happens down here. It's all Call of Duty and, Pac-Man. Like, there is actual video game cabinets back there, and I do occasionally play them, but that's just for show. It's just for man cave. But as far as he's concerned, that's what I'm doing down here. So and she can't come down. She's afraid to come down because I'm always on camera. So she doesn't actually know. But so the paradigm of working from home has definitely been a double-edged sword for me. I would also say that in addition to, being a bigger workaholic than I was before, I think that I am less hopeful for any kind of shift in the partisanship of education than I was before. I don't think that that's going away. I used to think that there were aspects of education that people arbitrarily took issue with because they didn't like the association with Betsy DeVos or something like that. But I don't think those stuff is going away. I think those things are here to stay now. And I don't see why it has to be that way. And I think it's going to make everything more difficult than it has to be. And I'm just realizing that like now, as we start to shift into the new administration, that those things are not going away. And that just seems weird to me. But that's a low, because I had high hopes for that.
Yeah, and on that point, that is something. While we talked about the successes that we've had with education, getting schools one-to-one, having conversations about reliable internet, it also has been a low just to see how really, truly divisive education is, right? And how people get a stance and they're not willing to give any ground on certain issues. Obviously, the biggest is charter versus the public. I'm going to say the public because charter schools are public schools, but the only way people identify the difference is charter and public. People just aren't willing to give ground on that. When it comes to potential appointees for certain positions, and we'll get into these two, i.e. the one here in Indiana, the one nationally, it's just been sickening. The supports for whether or not a school should reopen in one area versus whether or not it should open in another area is sickening because they're not all the same. And if I could just be semi-political, I think the one aspect of President-elect Joe Biden that I'm cautious of is for him to say he wants all public schools to open within 100 days, because I just don't think all public schools will be in areas that are conducive for opening. And I even think in some communities inside of cities, it's not conducive for schools to open, right? Like I think the east side of Indianapolis versus Carmel, Carmel officials in Indiana could be different based off of, cases and things like that. Now I know we're different counties and stuff, but to say like if the governor was to come out and say all Indiana schools will open, like not taking that in account is something. But Andrew, I agree. That's been a low for me, man. Just seeing like people just ain't willing to give no ground and listen to other folks or be open to differing views when it comes to educational topics and things like that. And that's sad because at the end of the day, what's getting lost is kids, right? We arguing about things and ain't talking about how it's going to impact the kids. We arguing about things that's going to impact us as adults with college degrees, master degrees, and, good paying jobs and stuff. And I think that's just silly and it's sad too. Shawnta, anything on that before we kind of jump into, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about 2021 and beyond. But as we close 2020 right now, any other lows or anything you want to highlight that Andrew and I touched on from a low standpoint?
I didn't really think about the whole work from home. I mean, it's been better for me. But I think what's been hard is the times when I'm here, my husband's here, and my two kids are here because they're in class, and it's like, and I'm sure. And this one day, my husband was just sitting there working. I'm like, he didn't have a shirt on, but he wasn't on camera or nothing. But he got up to cross the room, and of course, my kids are on Zoom. I'm like, they're in class. Like, where's your? And he's like, so it's like just navigating like the logistics of stuff like that has been difficult. And then my sons, who are identical twins, they're in fourth grade, they want to play games. I'm sitting here watching my son steadily keep turning his laptop. Clearly, you're not in class or you switching screens. And so I pretend to go a different direction so I could turn back around. Up here watching Minecraft video. What do y'all do when y'all watch? And I'm saying y'all, because my husband's included in this, where y'all go watch videos of people doing these games and learning. I don't even understand that life. But and I can relate to Andrew's wife, because I swear my husband goes to the basement. That's all he's doing. I'm sure he's doing other things, but it just seems like that's all he's doing with his friends. But it's like, it's hard to keep my own kids focused on to learning because they're switching between tabs and watching someone play games on YouTube and trying to not get caught by me. But then when I ask my son, like, isn't your teacher teaching? Oh, she's just going over the directions. So like even negotiating, I think the worst things my kids did, they started making videos of themselves and sending it to each other in Canvas because that's the platform. Mm-hmm. So I actually went into their Canvas account and there's all these random videos of them just like dancing around. I'm like, y'all doing this while y'all in class? Like sending videos to each other. And about a couple of weeks ago, before I went on medical leave, I told them like my kids would be with my parents. And well, my parents and mother-in-law, because my mother-in-law lives like 10 houses around the corner from my parents. And she said, well, can you make sure they're like apart and not talking to each other? Because she said, I'm not sure what they're doing. I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what they've been doing. So I think for me, that's been a low of trying to manage work life and then manage parent life in the same house and making sure they're staying accountable to their work and then making sure I'm being able to work and trusting them to do their schoolwork while I'm working, if that all makes sense.
It makes sense. Hey, I'm going to say something to you and other parents out there and educators. Let those babies make those videos. It's folks making millions of dollars off these YouTube videos. So who knows? Listen, let them babies be great. As long as they're not out here doing anything inappropriate, let those babies make that video, man. They might have the next YouTube channel that goes viral, and then you ain't never got to work again because your child that made some money off YouTube. I'm definitely advocating for my kids to make some videos, right? Because if they hit rich, I want them to say my principal supported my dreams. So that would be my piece. So we're going to jump into our wish list. So those that don't know and those that may know that are watching live and listening later, we write for Indy K12, which is a blogging platform in Indiana. And I've said this plenty of times to people in private and public. If you want the news on education in Indianapolis, I think you should add us to your subscription list. The conversations that we have, the topics that we talk about, both hit on the aspect of what's happening from a broader standpoint. We get personal at times and talk about ways that education has impacted us as educators, impacted our schools. We share the stories of kids and families and teachers and things like that. And I think we have a very unique voice in this education conversation. So I encourage you all to go to indy.education, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, Indy Education, Indy K12, Indy Kids Winning on Twitter. Follow us separately on social media. Just trust me, you're going to want to engage in this conversation. And outside of Chalkbeat in Indiana, we're the only ones having these conversations. And I can say that. And everybody else that is having the conversations are following our footsteps. So I'll put that piece out there. But anyway, every year we do a couple series. The first one that we do is we highlight, we do three. The first one is we highlight the top 10 most viewed blogs. And so that's posted right now. So we're currently in part 1. And so you're going to see that each day we're sharing the top 10 stories individually. So you're getting that as well. We also share the top view posts that weren't posted in the current year. So right now we have the list of that was in view that was posted in 2017 or 2018. And then also we do what's called our wish list. And so each of us have now written our wish list. And so I'm going to go first because mine was the last one to post. And so I'm going to share my screen for mine and ours as we go through them. And so let me just share my screen real quick of my wish list and kind of talk about it. So on the screen, you should see my wish list. And this is my wish list. And so 2021, my focus and my wish list is on focus. And there's 3 focuses that I want. Focus on people, which is students, staff, and parents. A focus on teaching and learning, and a focus on community. So I'll go real briefly on the 3 of them. Focus on students. I feel like if the pandemic didn't teach us anything about education, it should have taught us that we should be focused on the children and what the children need. And so I think that needs to go first and foremost. I know school leaders, we need to focus on our teachers and our staff because they are the frontline workers in this work and they need to be supported. from a standpoint of making sure they have all the tools to be successful, making sure that we're focused on their well-being, and making sure that we're focused on their pockets and making sure that they're adequately compensated. And then again, parents. I think I've said it before. We lived in a space where we felt like parents were on a need to know basis and not a right to know. And so parents need to be on a right to know basis when it comes to the education of their kids. The second piece would be a focus on teaching and learning. I'll keep it brief. Quality teaching and learning shouldn't be a buzzword. It needs to be something that happens. And so we need to make sure that we have an opportunity now to rethink education, rethink teaching and learning. So let's do that. And lastly is a focus on community. Listen, no school is great without the support of the community, and no community is great without a great school. And so those things are mutually exclusive to one another. They need to happen. And so I encourage schools to reach out to the community, and I encourage people in the community to reach into the schools so we all collectively do this together. And so that's my wish list for 2021, a focus on people, a focus on teaching and learning, and a focus on community. And so I'll stop sharing. And Andrew, I will yield the floor to you next, brother. So let me get yours up first. And you talk, man, about your wish list for 2021. All right. Got you queued up, brother, for your wish list.
So my first one was keep the technology and the internet. I think we've written at length about that on this blog and many others. So it's really kind of self-explanatory. Those Chromebooks that you gave out and those hotspots that you gave, let them keep them, right? I mean, you can provide an extra couple $100 out of that head count money for that, especially considering the amount that you get in return for it. It's probably the best return on investment that we spend in the school, honestly. Now that's not going to happen. They're going to make them get those hotspots back, and that's why I call it a wish list. The second one was collect and learn from the comprehensive data on pandemic on academics. We just don't know where these kids are at. And I don't think we had a good idea about where they were at before either. I mean, it's been, a year and a half since they've had a real test to show you where they're at. And people run from that data, or those data, I should say, because we have a culture in this country of making data punitive. So predictably, schools want to hide from it. But that doesn't actually change where the students are at and how they're doing. So, we need to figure out where they're at. And the only way I know how to do that is a test. I hate to be the one to tell people that, but that's probably what it's going to be, because it's not like anybody's sidekick and we can dive into somebody's mind. So we need some type of mechanism that allows us to ascertain where students are academically, and we need a longitudinal study about what is going to happen from this COVID time. I could see this being a problem years from now. Using games to teach. So I think as we've been online, we've seen teachers have been forced to take advantage of that. And because of that, you've seen the impact that it can potentially have. I mean, like we're talking about games like Minecraft. You were talking about that earlier, Shawnta. That's actually a game that you could conceivably use in class. There are academic applications for that game if a teacher wants to figure it out. I learned a bunch of history from games, a top-down strategy game. So I believe in the gamification of education. I understand that it's not applicable all the time, but it's definitely more doable than we have been. And now that schools have this nice one-to-one technology ratio, they should be able to do it a lot easier. We already touched on number 4, depart from the partisan bickering over like school choice. This matters less here than it does other places. I think school choice is kind of apolitical here. But nationally, it's difficult to have conversations about what's best for kids, because it almost always comes down to this debate, and that isn't a helpful debate because we already have charter schools. We already have school choice, and you can't really put the genie back in the bottle. No matter what your ideological opinion on it is, we have kids that are attending charter schools. We have kids that are on vouchers. Therefore, it isn't really helpful to talk about these issues in a paradigm where that doesn't exist. You know, it would be the equivalent of talking about some type of civil rights issue under a paradigm where in past injustices never happened. Well, they did.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we are in a situation where those schools exist, and whether you like them or not, millions of students attend them. So we need to figure out how to have conversations where that is not the focal point of the debate. And then allocate more money to schools. Obviously, there's really no need to talk about that. We all know what that means. I can't ever leave that off, though, because somebody will say that I don't think that that's a reason, or I don't think that that's a factor. So,
So Andrew, I will ask before we move on, and you guys will get this inside joke. How come you didn't talk about curriculum on your wish list?
Yeah, whoever commented on Twitter, if you read the blog, then you realize I don't follow the curriculum anyway. So, I to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you what was in it. So, it might be good for all I know.
This is what I'll tell folks. That this is why I think I might be, you know, I am biased. I'm not gonna say I am biased. This is why our blog, I think, has been successful. Yes, Dr. Smith, I am petty. We know where our range are and our topics that we talk about. We all have skill sets. While we could talk about a litany of things when it comes to education, what we've learned in the I don't even know how many years it's been since we've done this, but 4. We have a lane, and our blog is successful because if people want certain things, they know where to get it from. And while we are at times creative and step outside of topics that typically aren't our wheelhouse, like we simply in our wheelhouse, and that's great because I learn a lot from the two of them on certain topics as well. And so, if you want a question about curriculum, Educator Barnes and I will write about curriculum, sir. So all you have to do is add us if you want, and we can give you what you want. But again, right, it's a wish list, and this was his wish list. So if there's something you want on your wish list, I encourage you to write it. And I don't know, maybe our editor who's on the screen might cross-post it for you. We're open to that if it has some substance. So that goes to anybody. We do take people that want to post things. I think in 2021, we might need to charge people a small fee and maybe they donate to our respective schools. I don't know. Just a thought, you know, if you want to post it, because it shouldn't be free, right? We got a platform now. People follow us. So we're not about to be giving away our followers for free. But I digress. Let's move on. Last but not least, I'm gonna put it on the screen real quick. I'm gonna share my screen. And let's talk, because your wish list was first, which is why we have you last, because you posted yours first. So I want you to talk about what is on the wish list for 2021.
And I will say, I think what I appreciate about us in comparison to other people that write about education is that you go to certain sites, I'm not going to name any names, it seems like they have a narrative they're trying to tell. With us, we have, I mean, David and I, we have done pieces where we have disagreed. Absolutely. And there have been counter pieces. And like to the point where like people are like, do they have problems? I'm like, no, we just have difference of opinion. But from us, for Indy K12, you will see we're all Black. But we all have different opinions, and Black people aren't a monolith. And I think a lot of people, when they're like, oh, we're trying to get the Black vote or the Black opinion or the Black educators, no, you can't just dangle one carrot because you don't know where all our thoughts are. And so even when you look at our wish list, yeah, we have parts that overlap, but we all have different focuses based on our area of expertise and our background. So, like Andrew had already said, points 1 and point 2 is like students having the internet and maintain one-to-one technology. And the reason I'm saying maintain is because we have all these kids that have technology now, but technology has a shelf life. So do we have a long-term plan to replenish technology and keep the one-to-one? And so that's what because it's been great that all these people in Indy came together and donated this money and we got this technology, but what is the long-term plan? So in 2021 and moving beyond, I want to know how are we going to make this sustainable? Because like my nieces attend school in the suburbs. They've always had an iPad. Like they just had it from jump. And so how are we going to make sure that's the situation for kids in the urban setting and even in rural setting? And how do we make sure there's internet in some of these places and rural locations? Number 3, this is actually, I came up with this one based on my personal experience for my children. I had to watch my kids peck type to do their work. Everything has to be typed up, and my kids can't type. That's a problem. We're giving kids technology and you're giving kids time limits. So when school buildings close at the end of last school year, my kids will be up to 6, 7 p.m. just typing their assignments to turn in. And it got to the point where I just said to the teacher, I said, look, they're going to write it by paper and I'm going to start taking pictures because we can't be up all night. But on the other hand, I do feel like they need typing skills. So if we're going to give kids technology, we actually have to teach them how to type and use it appropriately. Like, don't put your whole message in the email subject line. We need to teach them some like email etiquette too. And then for listening to students, this, I guess a high for me, I now am the moderator of Ed Gems, a show with the Indy Recorder, who is trying to bolster their education coverage. But I got to talk to some students in Brownsburg and Carmel just about what it's like being a Black kid in the suburb. And I got to actually speak to the Future Leaders of Tomorrow, which is a group in Brownsburg at the high school. And we don't talk to kids enough about their experiences, about what they need. You have all these adults making plans for children without getting the input of children. So if you're at a school and you're not doing like student surveys about how students are doing, like you really need to do that. 6, increase employee compensation. And I said employee, I'm talking about everybody. I couldn't do my job successfully if it's not for the support staff. And support staff in a lot of our schools are some of the lowest paid people. And depending on what role they have, they may not even get paid on over breaks. A lot of times for teachers, they may have a 10-month contract, but that pay is stretched across the 12 months. If you are assistant, when winter break comes around, you're not getting paid. So I think we should increase the compensation for all levels. I actually said this on my own podcast yesterday. When I took my admin job, I was a elementary librarian on a 10-month contract. I switched to a 12-month contract and my pay increased $600. So if you sit there and do the math, you can figure out that I was bringing in less per paycheck because I went from a 10-month contract to a 12-month contract and only increased $600 in compensation. To the point that when I shared my previous 2 contracts to say, hey, this is what I'm making, my school's like, this is the max for your role. They did give me $5,000 increase in salary for this school year. But my husband said they just threw coins at me and that should have been at least a bare minimum. So for me, everybody's compensation should be at the level where it should be, because my pay shouldn't be right above a teacher's pay. And it's not me like bragging on myself, but if you're asking me to do all these administrative tasks, and I think David can agree with this, you're doing a lot of stuff as an administrator. So that's time away from your family, time away from your personal life. Like, you deserve to be compensated well. And then I'm hoping that we just didn't get woke over the summer, and then when we get to 2021, we forgot that Black Lives Matter. So I would like to see that continue. I recently wrote about Black gifted education from the lens of myself and of my own sons. So you can read that. It was written about a week ago. But there are a lot of things that are in place that are attempting to hold Black children back. And I'm just not convinced that we're actually really going to do the work when 2021 comes around. I just feel like it was all for show. It was performative for a lot of people, and they were just going to continue the status quo.
So those are our wish lists. And I think, Shawnta, something you said at the end about Black lives actually mattering. Every time I think we didn't, again, it's me being naive, right? I think we didn't made some strides, right? Like, I will admit, I was thrilled when Biden picked Senator Harris to be his vice president, because I was just like, you know what? I got a daughter who's Black, and hopefully, God willing and prayerful that Senator Harris is a great role model as vice president. And my daughter can see that. And then, I think we're going to kind of pivot to this, and we've all seen on social media the talk around who's going to be the new Secretary of Education, and there were names floated of 2 particular Black women that were considered for the job, and to watch the smear campaign by certain organizations attacking, while they didn't initially say it's because they were Black, the level of attacks and the level of criticism that they aimed at these women was rooted in the fact that they were Black. And that was sickening and unfortunate. And while it has not been announced yet, it seems that President-elect Biden has selected a Secretary of Education. But I say all that to say, I hope that folks, all those books that they read and all those book studies that they did, that some of that knowledge carries into 2021. You know, I don't know. I hope it doesn't take another Black person being killed on social media for us to wake back up. I hope we stay awake. But again, I'll wait and see for that. But here's what you can expect, that the writers at Indy K12 will continue to push the narrative of Black Lives Matter and continue to push the narrative of all the things that we talk about. And again, as I said before, if you would like to write a piece, send it our way. And our editor will take a look at it. And if it makes it, it makes it. But if there's things, we encourage you to subscribe to us and follow us. We do like the comments. I made the joke about the guy that made the comment about the curriculum. We love comments. We love your feedback. I love when folks get mad about things that we write. We've always I love when folks read something we wrote in January and comment like, did you go searching for it? Like, what is this? You know, so we appreciate, we love that. And we also love the support that we get. So we're kind of close to our hour. So I'm going to have each of you, I have a topic, and you tell me which one you want to kind of harp on. So it could either be Indiana selecting its first Secretary of Education. It could be this idea of standardized tests in 2021. It can be, you know, Biden's potential pick for Secretary of Education. Or it could be whether or not you think all schools should open in Biden's first 100 days. So I'll start with you, Shawnta. You pick a topic. Which one of these do you want to take the solo screen and talk about as your closing thoughts?
That was a lot of topics. I thought I was gonna have like 2 things to choose from. Yeah. That was like a whole list.
Pick one. Yeah, you pick which one. Or you can pick one that wasn't even listed. You saying, you know what, I want to talk about this in 2021. So what's it gonna be for you?
I mean, I was paying attention, but I mean, you said like testing and then schools opening, and it was a lot on there. But in closing thoughts here, I think as I'm looking towards 2021, I'm just looking for schools to make a commitment to serve students and serve them well. As we earlier talked about, a lot of schools, I don't want to say a lot, there's some schools just really weren't making progress before the pandemic. And so now you have this pandemic, and I think it could be potentially used as an excuse to kind of skate and not hold ourselves accountable. And we still have to hold ourselves accountable to making sure students are successful. I know there was the Teachers for Good Trouble. And what was interesting enough, one of the teachers that was behind that I ended up talking to, and I know I wrote like they shouldn't have done that walkout. And I know David had interviewed them. But for me, I don't think schools should be penalized for the data, but I do think we need to have the test and get the data so we can use it. And because it's just a snapshot in time, right? It lets you know where students are. I mean, my kids sat here and took NWA at home. And when I looked at their scores, it was able to tell me that my sons were still above grade level in reading, but in math, they kind of just have flatlined at where they were. That's data that was important for me to know because I'm having to do a little bit of math stuff for a winter break. So I just want us to not use the pandemic as an excuse to hide or not work and not hold ourselves accountable for diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism work. Because and I pushed back at my own school. We were supposed to start this equity work, and it got pushed to second semester. And even though my school pushed it to second semester, I continued doing the stuff that I was doing last school year, and I ramped it up this school year. So my team has been focused on it. And what's interesting enough, when you go ahead and move forward on something you're interested in, and other people see it, I have other people that's not even on my team that ask me about the stuff I'm sharing with my team. So that's all I gotta say.
I love it. Andrew, what's your closing thoughts? What are you looking forward to in 2021?
Yeah, I agree. We need that data. And going back to what you were saying earlier, not having a test and not having that data doesn't show that Black Lives Matters. I've done all this stuff about, over social justice summer and things like that. We read all these articles and we share all these things. But if we don't have this data somewhere on paper, then they literally don't matter. They literally do not factor in. Like it's not a metaphor or anything like that. If we don't have the data, they literally don't matter. They that's not a figure of speech. So I think we need to make sure that we have the tests or something that resembles a test, so we figure out where these kids are at and just how much work we have to do. It's okay if it's a lot. I don't think anybody would expect it not to be. But if we don't at least get out in front of it and start cutting off, because here's the thing, there's time over the summer too. And I think a lot of parents will be on board with opportunities in the summer. But in order to do that, what do we have to do? We have to know where they're at before they leave, right? I don't want to combine the COVID slide with the summer slide and whatnot. So I think we need to move beyond some of these conversations, which were good, but I think a lot of schools wanted to stay there, and we need to start talking about what that actually looks like in real life. And it doesn't necessarily just look like what you think, what, you might think it looks like, which is, I know a lot of schools are very proud of themselves for, having certain people come speak and things like that. And that's all well and good. But with that being said, if you are willing to have a school full of children not take a test and not know where they're at for an entire year because you think it might make you look bad, that is definitely not woke. So I just want people to realize that it's not just about the book clubs, and it's not just about the videos you share. It's about what you do day in and day out, and what are you willing to take that heat? Are you willing to take that constructive criticism if your students take this test and it comes back and it says half of them are 2 grades below grade level?
I love it. I echo everything that you all say. I think the piece that I'm going to follow kind of closely is twofold. So I'm firstly going to closely follow the new Indiana what is he? The education chief? I don't even know what the title is. Education chief.
Secretary of Education.
There we go. Secretary of Education, Indiana, Katie Jenner. I'm going to closely monitor, the work that she's doing. She is appointed by the governor and was selected by the governor, which is new for us here in Indiana. Typically that role has been voted on, and we've seen some very contentious elections. I remember early in my career watching Glenda Ritz shock Tony Bennett, which was a shocker. And then I watched as Dr. McCormick wiped the floor with Glenda Ritz, and all that, and how that contentious has been with the past two education secretary or, people that we've had in that role. Eventually, at the end of their term, seemed to got into it with the governor, which made things hard in the state. I mean, so I'm going to watch that, and I'm hoping that she does work that reflects the entire state. That she does work with K12, she does work with higher education, and she does work centered around what we've talked about, racial justice and racial equity within schools across the entire state. And so I'm looking forward to that. And then obviously I'm looking forward to Biden's selection and what that means for the Department of Education, and how, at least what it seems, that we're going to have an educator in that role and not just someone who essentially bought her way into the seat. And so I'm looking forward to those two things. And so look forward to us writing about those, particularly me. Look forward to the podcast being about those, and just excited for the year. And so as we close out 2020, I want to thank everybody who's kicked it with me on the Recess podcast. Again, it's been 26 episodes. It's crazy. When it started on April 7th, I didn't even know how far I would go with it. And so I'm excited that I was able to launch this in 2020. Excited for what 2021 has. The January shows, I'm going to have some conversations with Teach Indy. I'm going to have some conversations with the Indianapolis Teaching Fellows. I'm going to have another conversation with the executive director here for Teach for America Indianapolis. And I'm going to also have a conversation with the 3 new Mind Trust Fellows here in Indiana. So that's going to be awesome. And then in February, I'm going to do my first Recess Podcast national conversation when I'm going to bring on a guest that's not from Indiana, not from Indianapolis. So I'm excited about that. But also, as always, continue to subscribe to Indy K12, not just the rest of this year, but I promise you, we're going to have some really good pieces coming in 2021, because there's a lot happening and a lot that we haven't talked about yet that's on the horizon. And so be on the lookout for that. But as always, happy holidays, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever it is you celebrate. Happy to you and all of that. I wish everybody peace and blessings. And as I always say at the end of every show, create the platform, control the conversation, change the culture. Catch us in 2021. And God bless everybody and be safe. Take care.